we've been having a lot of world building streams lately. 2, 3, 4 weeks. I'm not quite sure how many, but not quite a month, I don't think, but it's been quite a few, and it's fun. I feel like we've come a long way with the things we've talked about since the start of all this. There's definitely a lot of things to discuss still, because world building can be endless, so you sort of have to choose what you're gonna focus on and what's relevant most of all, and revisit things if necessary. So what I can see us doing and going into soon is going back to the story stuff and outlining what happens in the rest of the main quests of episode 1 pretty soon, and I think we'll probably have a bit of world building in between that as well. We'll probably do both, a mix of world building and story stuff, because we got a lot of this coming up, things happening for Late Fall and Everboom, so I think those sort of things will come together. And there's a few really interesting things to talk about here as well, and some of these I'll bring up today. Some little bits and bobs, I think, up for discussion, and make some notes. But we're still going to carry on filling in our pantheon today, and I'd say it's going to be a bit of everything chat, but carrying on from where we left off, which we were on the magic and technology side of things. We talked a lot about magic, but not so much about tech. But we were getting onto the tech side of things when we were discussing the invention of a light-related source that one of the legends will have invented. So we'll make some notes about that too in a sec. So I have a tab up here about technology as well, which had some really interesting bits and bobs. Energy, medicine, food, water, transportation, communications, recreation, manufacturing, and all these little bits and bobs that make the world work. So I think that's an interesting thing to think about too, especially because it's good to think about that, so everything can make sense in the world. So we might talk about that for a bit as well. But before all that, we're going to just clarify things from the end of last stream, because I know we ended a little bit abruptly. And where is here? Oh yeah, that is West Coast, I think. I'm pretty sure of that. Unrelated, but I was finally able to get a haircut yesterday. Couldn't get that one since November because of lockdowns. Oh, congrats, forgotten. I mean, I say embrace your inner caveman, but you do you know, if it makes you feel better, you can do a good haircut. I could do with one myself instead of doing it myself. I could do with a professional doing the job for me instead. West Coast. Alright, so one cool thing we talked about at the end of last stream was the vampire legend in particular, who is this one here. That they'll very likely get switched around though, because we're not going to have their day be the Monday of the week. We'll probably move it to the midweek or something. But we'll keep him here for now, so we've got it in chronological order for just a bit of clarity and so we don't get confused. But we fleshed out like this one a lot more, and sort of tied up some loose ends, make him connect with other bits of lore and story that we'd thought of, and even with Violet's character and everything else. So it's pretty cool, and I might add a few more headings to this actually, because there's a couple of good ones that I thought of, and I'll bring that up shortly. Right, so reminding ourselves, I've set myself with Lude and Lusar for the name. I think Matt suggested that, and it has it connects with light, the name of it, obviously, because of luminous and lunar and Lucifer. So there's a lot of meaning behind that name. So knowing that, I was like, yeah, that's kind of cool. And also because it just sounds nice, Lucer. It's quite easy to say and memorable. And Lou Day sounds pretty cool too. Now, we need to think a little bit more behind the meaning of the day, but clearly it stands for light or luminous. Luminous, is that word? It is, isn't it? I don't know if I've spelt it right, but there's not a red line under it, so it should be good. A day of, I'm following this outline where it stands for being a day of something. Well, let's get this there. So I don't know what it's actually a day of yet, but it is going to be something related to light, and somehow we'll make that work with a bit of thinking, and I think we could, because light's pretty flexible. Luminosity, yeah, I've spelled it completely wrong, haven't I? But I never know, because us folk in the UK use a lot in our words, so I never know what the right spelling is, with a U or without a U, or both. Sometimes the English language is very, very silly. Hair looks good, Rose, for cutting them yourself, with some horror images of women trying to cut their bangs. Yes, I have to cut my own because they'd all be like down here by now. But I don't go crazy with them. I just give them a bit of a trim. I don't like get the scissors and do that or anything, otherwise it definitely would be a disaster. But what can I say? I'm a pro. I must be a pro. And another couple of things that were really cool that you guys brought up was what the actual great deed it could have been that he did. And I got really excited when it was mentioned about a magical tower that radiates a beacon of light. And I love the idea of something epic as a light source that would have really spread across the whole world, ideally, because that would be worthy of a great deed, rather than just being the inventor of oil lamps. That's a little bit dull. And creating a tower and placing it somewhere and having this beacon of light would act as a light source for everyone in the world, and that's pretty creative, I think, and unusual, and you don't really hear of something like that in fiction, not any that I know. If there is a story that has a tower that acts as a source of light for a world, then I'm very keen to know. But another reason I love the idea of a tower being the great deed as well is because that could act as their monument. So we know that the lakeful tree is the monument of this guy. So I have the map. Let me get the map up. So here it is. It's in paint. So I'm gonna open paint so you guys can see the map. The Unnamed World of Raindrop Chronicles. Okay, so here is our map, and I have started roughly marking where each of the legends' monuments would be in the world. Now we know that they're the stars, that the gods are organised in a celestial way, that so people could easily like pray to them and do it that way, and I'd imagine that'd be common. They look at the star and sort of communicate with the god or sort of pray to them in that way. But the monument idea is cool as well because that's directly in game and could allow for something visual and epic. It's cool. It could be a spot for quests and all sorts of things, like a waypoint almost. And I also like the idea of making it regional because naturally where the monument is could be where that group of people, the population of the surrounding area could be more aligned to that particular legend, which is interesting too, because the religion itself, like these legends, they're universal, I'd say. Like everybody in the world has this same religion. That's how I'm seeing it so far. But certain people could be more swayed to a specific one of the 6 of the legends. So that keeps things simple. Like, we're not going wild and having a crazy amount of religions. We're having individual legends within that religion that people could align themselves to more. So we know your Ursa is here in Everbloom Forest. Haladar, their monument makes sense to be in the Flying Cloud Zone, considering their great deed is so related to raising the Sky City. And it's, I think, from what I remember, I'm going to have to double check notes, but I think it was a statue was the plan was for that one. So I'll get that one down as well, but we'll focus first on our vampire legend. So I've plopped them here. Now, the reason why I've plopped the tower in the mountain zone is because it is probably going to be the highest point in the world. It only makes sense if light's going to spread out and have this great significant air, like what do you call it? I can't think of the right word, but be able to reach everybody. It would have to be high up and like be able to spread. And I imagine that the mountain zone, the very, very tip of the highest point, could be where the tower is, and that could be pretty epic if you think about when we get to that point in game. It's almost an adventure in itself, going up the mountain to see the tower. We could link some kind of quest or plot point in with that somehow, but because this vampire legend is so part, or will be part, of Violet's arc, even if it's just a background detail in her arc, it's not like this vampire legend is essential for Violet's own story and that you have to be aware of this vampire legend. But I see them as a background detail that will just give more meaning and resonate with her arc more. But the game would still be playable and the story would still be understandable, even if somebody didn't pay attention to this side of the game, for example. Because how I'm seeing it right now is I could imagine there would be scriptures around lying about in the world, books, like the God's own versions of the Bible. And you could pick up these scriptures and read them. And that allows for all of us to get super creative with writing and come up with all sorts of stories and inner monologues that these legends have been going through. And obviously reading in-game books and notes is an optional thing. You don't have to do it to complete the game and all that, and if you want to do the bare minimum, but it's definitely extra fluff that just breathes more richness into the world if you do pay attention. Some RPGs go that way, where they have, like, you're able to read things and look at things in game, and it can just really make you connect with the world you're in even more if you actually read and pay attention. And it can foreshadow things, and it's like you can almost work out stuff that's going to happen almost from reading them, and even come up with cool theories, and that sort of thing is really exciting to me. So yes, and that sort of stuff's pretty easy to implement as well, because the hardest part is the writing, and once the writing is there, it's just about just plopping it into the game and making it work with a UI nice looking box when you click the item and read it. Wait, it's only one monument. I don't think that works. It's like if we put a light out up lighthouse up Mount Everest, I don't think it will do any good. Well, this is a fantasy story, so we can use our imagination, but that's why we got to think how it works. This is a magical tower, don't forget. So this elf from the Age of Stars probably is quite in touch with his magic, and we're going to see him as like a really... The person who sort of started tech, he was like the herald to technology, maybe even. He was pretty a big deal to become one of the six. And of course, not every random could have accomplished a feat like this, and that's why they're not legends, and he is, as well as probably a lot of other things as well. But yeah, I was kind of very keen on the tower because it's epic, you know, it's just epic. So and it makes sense. That's the only thing that would be equivalent to Moonlight if you can get it to work. And it's also easy for when I think of the game visually at night time too, because we can still have light at night shining on us, and we could be like, well, it's the light from the tower, right? We don't end up with a really dark screen at night time, and we have to have flashlights and torches, and it gets all messy if we don't, and all that could just add extra confusion. So this is a nice easy way to solve the problem. Yes, so that's kind of how I'm seeing it right now, that their monument could be there in the mountain. And it's cool there, it's a great location because it's nicely spread from the other two gods. I'm not sort of keen on having two gods in the same zone. And spreading them out episodically as well is pretty cool too. So having this god be the episode 1, this one being episode 3 one, and I'm sure we'll have another god there, and one here and one here. And that would nicely even it out, because there's six legends in 6 episodes. So it could almost follow a sort of theme, one per episode, which each episode sort of focuses on that specific one and the themes that legend stands for even. Okay, so we can cross that off for now. And we'll put location and monument. We don't know the name yet. We're keeping all the regions unnamed because it's going to be way more fun to think the names for them together when we actually start those regions in the very far future. So now just mountain region. Tower. Now I'm sure we can develop that tower far more when the time comes. We don't have to do that yet. We can totally keep things vague for now and then develop them further with the right point when it makes sense to talk about it more. But there we go. And let me just check something about this one's monument. So, a statue in the centre of the city. There we go. Now these three are still pretty vague. We've got some sort of words that is a great starting point for them. I think out the three of them, the Kit Legend is probably the most developed. We've had a few ideas thrown about for them. Really like the idea of an escapism god. I think a good one to add to this would be protection, as something they stand for, because it fits help safe haven for people. It's pleasure house almost of leisure, and it's like a beacon of hope almost, that place would be, and people could pursue their dreams and arts and crafts in there, or just be lazy if they want and escape from war. But you know, it's up to us. We could totally spend some time fleshing out and thinking a little bit more about these ones, or we could keep it to the side for now and just keep them in mind as we build the story and the rest of the world, and then something might come to us after that works. Sometimes it can be easier to not force yourself to think of what there should be or what the great deed should be, and go with that as you build the story while keeping them in mind. And that's why we got it tabbed open. So, Act of Greatness is how we're going to get that in now. How did we word it here? So, yeah, and the Christmas, like the gift-giving holiday celebration, we're having bright lights on trees just like we do at Christmas. Still really fits in with this, because those lights symbolise Luday and Lusa, and then the great thing he did. Yeah, it is epic. I put must be epic in brackets so that we didn't fall victim to having just something not cool enough. He invented, he created, or he invented a magical tower, because that's why we're highlighting magical, because yeah, it's no normal boring tower, this is a special tower. That radiates a beacon of light to provide a light source for a light source with maximum coverage for people after the moon lost its light. For the people of the world, all people of the world. And that's really cool, because there was no favouritism. He didn't only help a few. He did it for all. And I think there's absolutely, you know, everybody in the world could admire this this legend. This one, Halidar, maybe people from the Sky City in particular admire him. Well, them. Let's not forget this character's non-binary. But you know, it doesn't have to be limited to just the people of the Sky City, although I could imagine there's definitely people there specifically look up to that legend. There could be people from elsewhere in other regions that still admire what they stood for, such as enjoyment and the zest they had that gave them their time of holiday, and they respect that and like that, and we're not sort of putting our races and that into boxes, like saying only fake and love Haildar, and only the elves can like Lucer, you know, I'm even forgetting their names now. You've got a meeting, be back there. Awesome, Van. Take care, and I hope it goes well. And it goes by super fast. So cured, let's clarify this a bit more. Cured a plague that was spreading across the world. And that's a really good one for that character, considering they are all about healing disease. And that's really cool. And I could imagine that because at that time in the world was more of a utopia, people generally got on, and it was a lot of harmony, and the only thing that could affect them majorly would be disease, because there wasn't really war or anything like that back then. Okay, so there was one that was really cool. I thought that had that came to mind the other day, so I'm going to get that in as a heading. And this is something that could really like benefit the dialogue in game. Curse words from them. Curse words that formed, does that make sense? From them. What I mean by that, if anyone's confused, obviously in our world we say, oh my god, Jesus Christ, right? When people get mad. And we won't be saying that in Raindrop Chronicles because there's no God or Jesus Christ. And I mean, I think we'll be probably using the word legend more than God in our terminology. I think that would make sense. Although there's nothing, they are a form of God and could still easily be called that. We could get like really funny with these sort of words. So I had a few come to mind looking at these, but this is also something that we can build over time. So for Yorasar, something like by Yora. It all depends what works with their name, because certain curse words and exclamations wouldn't work with some names and it would sound weird. But sometimes certain ones could have a really good ring to it and fly. Oh yeah, there was another one. Hallet. So I can't think of any for Lou right now. Lou off. Lou you, it doesn't quite have the same ring size, but some, you know, there might be something that would really work with it. But just things like that, inserting that in dialogue now and again, just again makes the world feel a bit richer, and connecting these legends even more into the game, and having them mentioned and referred to and stuff is cool, so that they're not just background pointless things in the world. We're actually making them actively mentioned and part of the world. It would be hard for that to work with regular light, since there's square root stuff with light spreading out the distance, but I guess magic stuff would prefer. Yeah, it's like when you start to limit yourself to just thinking hard magic systems and hard sci-fi, and that it can be quite limiting. And with you know, I like to sometimes still use your imagination, especially with a fantasy story. And it's about a balance. I do like to have some realism and believability thrown in, and that's why I like to consider things properly about the magic system and how its purpose, rather than just have it there for no reason. And it's really cool to think in depth about how something's possible, that's for sure. But at the same time, nothing up with having something a little bit over the top and fantastical in a fantasy setting. Because we aren't on planet Earth. Boring, right, if we just did everything that we did on planet Earth in this game? Because it is impossible. Magic makes everything possible, right? Or is that right? Is that a flawed opinion? Can only magic do so much? I mean, yeah. Okay. So I think we filled in this quite a bit. There's a few character connections, I've added curse words, and this is just something we can do over time, folks. Like, I'm not going to put pressure on us to like rigidly fill in every box and force ourselves to think of each of their stories at this exact moment in time. I'm pretty sure a lot of this could come to us over time, and we'll just have a light bulb moment at some point or another and be like, yeah, that one should be that, because the story's got this happening in it now, so it only makes sense to have them go in that direction, etc, etc. Also, there was one thing I did want to mention. I was like looking through the timeline. Yeah, for those of you that don't know, we have a new page in our Lore Bible. Feel free to have a nosy if you want to. Yes, I was looking at the Age of Stars. This is a really fascinating age in the world because everything just changed. And it's cool because this is when the stars formed, and as we know, the stars are what people, where religion has come from in this world. And at one time, I'm sure at the start of this age, nobody knew what on earth they were. They were like, what's going on? Because everyone was caught up in all the other mess that was happening. And I'm seeing it as they look to the stars as their beacon of hope, because everything was awful. People were turned into monsters, people were getting killed by monsters, there was no light, there was a ton of natural disasters happening, probably with the tides and all sorts of things, and it just wasn't a very nice time. So the stars would have given them somewhat a little bit of light, at least. Not much, not as much as the moon would, but there'd be some. And because of that it makes sense for them to have naturally stood as some kind of hope for people at that time. And I could have imagined people, when it progressed into praying to the stars and sort of seeing the legends of the past in the stars, as time passed into the age of the first men, that that sort of way of life carried on, and that custom carried on for the people of this age into the modern day. Of course, until the stars stopped fading, that's when everyone panicked, because they no longer had their what was hype for them so much during that time. Now the question is there any truth to it? Is it all in their heads that the stars are these legends, really? Well, right now at this point in time, I'd like to say there is some truth to it. It's not just a coincidence. But how could they have, do they know this themselves, and how would they have realised that is the case, that stars are these people, the souls of these people who have passed on? Maybe there was a prophecy or someone spiritual, and during that time, as they looked at this hype, and that they came to that conclusion from some solid substantial evidence or trustworthy source. Who knows? But that's something to consider as well. But for sure, it's really cool and coming into place. Now, let me see what it says. Oh, so that's what people mean when they call me a loser. Oh my goodness, like loser. You loser. Well, isn't that a compliment in a way, considering he's meant to be this legend? But it's worth adding it there. It's funny how he actually does sound like that. Okay. I'm going to just title this page as The Age of Stars, because I'm sure at some point or another we will have a page for each and talk about each age in a bit more detail, particularly the age of the first men and the new age, the age of fading stars as well, because that's close to the present day and will naturally have affected things that are happening more in the game right now as well. So we'll talk about them ones at some point. But the Age of Stars was definitely worth bringing up because of all this weird stuff that was happening there that could have affected the lore of today. So our last three gods, we have these ones, and they're going to all be from the Age of the First Men. I think it's only common sense that it's going to be that, because that's when those races came about, and it was also before the Age of the Fading Stars. Once the Age of the Fading Stars begins, we can no longer really have any legends because they're gone, or they're going, should we say, slowly fading. And I guess it's just a matter of who came first, but we can keep that open for now if we wish. I'd say that the Kit came last, though, and they're our most modern legend. But I could imagine they were definitely around in a time of war, for there to be a reason for this safe haven. And we could plop that in there then. Built or created, because we did consider architecture an industry for this one. I mean, if they built it, maybe it makes sense that it should stay there for this one, rather than be part of the charity and community one. Built a safe haven for all people during a time of war. Safe haven and place of escapism for all people during time of war. And this safe haven would be massive. And people painted, people did so much, and also there was something cool that I considered and came to mind as well the other day, that arts and is a very valued job in this world, and they probably get paid a lot compared to how it is on our world, because artists aren't treated as they deserve in our world, for sure. Underpaid and underappreciated and not given the wage they deserve. So we can flip it on its head in this world and have them be like, whoa, rich. And I think connecting it with this and having a lot of people finding their inspiration from this safe haven during that time would have created a lot of really talented artists and skilled people in the arts industry. Another really cool thing before we move on to the tech side of thing, again, because I did want to give a little bit more attention to tech today, considering we talked about magic a lot last time, but not so much tech. I was thinking how cool it would be if, hang on, where's my notes? I found something as I was reading a Worldbuilding article, and it made me think, oh yeah. So I'm looking for that again so I can get the exact right words in my head of how it was explained. You telling me I could plan to red stripe in a white canvas in Raindrop Chronicles and be rich? Please God, let me my way there. Probably not. I'd say your skill has to be exceptional, like you have to actually be good, because Nigel Bookington is like a casual artist. That's how the Fruits were able to steal an easel in the first place during the story in the game that we've already done. And he uses art as a way to escape from his personal anxieties that he's going through. But he's not rich, and that's because he's not really got there with his talent yet, and he also lacks the confidence and belief in himself. He has a lot of self-doubt, so he hasn't really reached a point where he can be like that. But it's inspiring to think that, you know, with enough skill and practice it could take someone, because it's a nice wholesome thing, I think. And I think there's going to be a lot of potential dark themes in this game, but there should also be wholesome things too, and twisting typical things on their head like that, because usually it's not artists are the ones that struggle in this world. Starving artists, I say. They struggle for a lot of us to make a career from being creative. So it's kind of nice to think it could be different in this world, especially looking at this idea here with this safe haven that would have been built around the time of war. That's like a really wholesome little bright thing that would have been around in probably quite a depressing time. And I wonder where that haven would be, nestled in the canyons, at the site of the old carnival, buried under the waste, at the heart of the urban city, in the snowy forest, at the beach. Might need to narrow things down. Let's have a look at our map now you say that. So as I said a little bit earlier, that I love the idea of spreading out these monuments. Now, I think it's pretty clear, it's staring us right in the face, that the monument to the kit is going to be the safe haven. I see monument as whatever the symbol the solid material symbol of that legend while they were here on this planet that's still here today. So it's a tower for Lusa. It's a statue of Haldar, which is fitting because naturally people would have really appreciated what he did with Raising the Sky City. And but yeah, so we have a few empty zones. So we've kind of filled episode 1 and episode 3 and episode 6's spots, but we still have the urban zone is still free for us, the desert zone is still free for us, and the highlands and farmland zone is still free for us for the episode 2 place. But I believed that the draw, the female justice draw, that's all about freedom and justice, would be more of the desert zone. I thought that was a fit for them, considering Dra would probably be quite heavily populated in the desert for them to be there. I don't know, I think urban zone for this kit, because the urban zone's gonna be populated, right? It's I mean, there's a couple. It could be the urban zone, but it could be the beach zone as well, considering that is a place of luxury too. So it's whatever we think is the best fit. Now, these two sort of come in, I've put them as part of the same episode in where they'll be, but I imagine the beach zone would sort of trickle into the previous episode, and this would sort of trickle into the end of episode 4 and 5. So it wouldn't hurt to have it be that one, and it's spread enough if we had the draw there. But I think it's still worthy of considering the urban one as well as a choice. So it's either the beach or the urban are the ones that are springing to my mind as the key places. Urban one, because it would have been very populated with people, and that would have been the perfect spot to get everyone in, and a lot could have, thinking of how that could have, civilization could have changed. Probably not much if the kit legend is the most recent. I imagine that the urban zone has become a lot more gritty and corrupt, so that sort of negative progression is intriguing, how it could have ended up that way. Whereas the beach has stayed probably quite peaceful and nice and like a haven still, perhaps. But it's quite interesting thinking of it in a zone that's different now as well. Whereas the farmland and highland zone, that sort of way of life is a lot more stricter and harsher. It's not far out to imagine it was in the capital, but that's where the government are based, and I could imagine it could have been pretty dangerous to have plopped their safe haven right but next to the government headquarters and the monarchy, and the building probably would have been destroyed by Traitorio if it was there. So as far away from Traitorio as possible, and where the older leaders and kings are, feels like what makes sense, because it's it shows the difference in, like, go as far away from the government and where the epicenter of the war is, right? So, Japanese world throne of wood, it's a popular theme for animes these days, where someone from our world dies and then he's transferred to a fantasy world, starting his life over with possible powers. Oh right, yeah, I'm pretty I haven't heard of that one before, but that's interesting. And oh right, so who's the other legend that isn't assigned a zone yet? Oh right, the cat, yeah, the reptile, I still haven't put them there in the desert zone, but I imagine it would be there. It just seems to have a fit for me, the reptile being there rather than anywhere else. But that leaves, like, if say, you know, the canine could fit as being in the Highlands, if we've still got that, because we'll still have that episode 2 spot there unused. And the canine, what traits did they stand for? The Walker. They stand for friendship, helpfulness, charity and community. I think that could work. The farm, although it's not very developed yet, the capital and the farmlands, the idea is that the capital and the farmlands are next to each other, but there's a sort of division there of class. That you've got your down-to-earth, really grounded, close-knit community living in the farmlands, whereas you've got your more ordered, noble, following rules and doing your duty, and not so much that family bond in the capital. And something about the whole community and friendship side of things makes me think of the farmlands, and probably people who lived in the capital that didn't like what they were doing deep down, or wanted to rebel against that. So although it's vague now, I feel like there could be a fit for that one. So we could roughly think about that and plot them there. So I guess the Canine Legend Monument might be at the capital, since that will actually, yeah, it seems to, like with themes, it seems to link, doesn't it? Like loyalty, doing your duty and dedication. The whole friendship, charity and helpfulness is almost the opposite of that, because it's rebelling against that. I imagine people who were reluctant to follow their duties, probably because they were torn between duty and friends and family, right? Because sometimes that it's what matters most. I personally am for friends and family over what any silly king says. But a lot of people in those times wouldn't have had a choice, and probably would have worried what would happen if they didn't do it. So it would be quite inspiring to have a god that stood for that, something that was so against what was forming at that time, or tried to make it less worse and less strict. So I think it could have a fit, and although it's not very developed yet, I think it could do with a bit of more thinking. I think it's definitely got some legs and potential. So let's imagine, I mean, we don't have their names yet, but we will, for now, I'm going to just mark some rough notes next to these dots here rather than put them on the map. One sec, folks, because I want you to be able to see. There we go. So for now, we'll just write some rough notes, considering we don't have the names and we're not like 1,000% sure, but we think it's pretty cool. So draw legend, justice, desert region. Make that a bit bigger. Well, yeah, thanks for bringing that up, Matt, because it was definitely on the cards to think of a spot for those ones, but it's probably a good idea to do it sooner rather than later, because it can help jog some potential ideas. So this one is the Kit Legend, and it was although transcendence is the word, I prefer thinking of it more as hope, for a bit more clarity what they stand for. I'm all for them still having a spiritual edge if there's a relevance, but We can still make it linked to transcendence. I don't think it's far from transcendence, because beauty and hope are sort of branches off that anyway. Urban region. Yeah, the more I thought about it, I was torn between the beach and the urban legend at first, but the more I thought about it, the more it made sense for the safe haven to be as far from the capital as possible. And then, you know how, like, we discussed when we made this map, that two sort of kingdoms have formed almost? Well, this isn't really a kingdom, because there's no rule here. It's more of an anarchy, if anything. It's the opposite of the traditional capital. But there are two large cities, basically, if we're removing the Cloud City from this for a moment, because that's very isolated. If we're just thinking what's on the actual continent, you've got the capital in the Highlands, and you've got the urban zone here, so it kind of makes sense that two groups of people would have formed there, where the safe haven was, that didn't want to be involved in the war, and the ones that were willing to be part of the war and do what they were told stayed in the Highlands. So the people from the urban zone are the rebels, the ones that want nothing to do with tradition and want that escapism from that way of life. And then it's become that now in a way as well, but just more gritty and more corrupt. They've kind of lost what it originally stood for, the safe haven. Like, the safe haven was meant to be something good and inspiring, like, don't do war, do art instead. do follow your dreams, don't get killed in a pointless way. That's a waste of life. I think that's kind of the message behind the safe haven and the kit god. But over time, it's lost that message with some peoples, and I'm sure there's really horrible factions and lack of morals of people. It just turned into a chaotic anarchy of criminals and crime lords and all that kind of thing. So that's interesting. And maybe some of them look towards the kit god, but they've kind of twisted what they stood for. Because the interesting thing I read here, the same basic religion exists throughout the world. This is like what it is, but like they emphasise one god or aspect of that religion, some more than others sometimes, but they generally believe that the same gods exist. But different groups or cultures may sort of have different approaches with those gods and have different truths and stories about each of them, because it makes a lot of sense that people read the scriptures and sort of form their own story from it, and the real truth gets lost along the way. And I think it's an interesting approach to sort of thematically think about that as we write the stories and within these episodes, with each monument and legend as a symbol of what's happening in that place. And I do really like the Kit Legends Haven becoming the city, since it could be like that at first. The city just seems messy, but then it turns out things are at least partly so built up because of all the accumulation of art that people have made over the years, like a big artist workshop full of incomplete worlds. Yeah, so it's an interesting one. And when we go to Yermanzone, I mean, it's more towards the end part of the saga, with it being labelled as episode 5, but I think it'd be pretty screwed up in a lot of ways, but I think there'd be potential there. I don't think it's all like a hellhole, but I think it'd be really cool to see us as the hero potentially change that place to what it was meant to have originally stood for, if you go down the good hero route, the noble hero route, and sort of make people realise that it doesn't have to be this way, and it'd be like super inspiring and people doing better for their lives rather than resorting to criminal acts and following a passion rather than crime. Like, for example, maybe one of the biggest criminals of the city who's doing no good and killing people, maybe they're like really, really good at crafts, really, or painting, or just something that's an art. Maybe they're a good performer or actor, but they're completely wasting their skill on crime. But maybe a quest could be help the crime find their passion. It's controversial because in most stories you kill the bad guy, you kill the criminal, they go to jail or you get revenge. But it'd be interesting to sort of be like, hang on a minute, how about you just stop doing that and do that instead, and it actually works. There's something kind of wholesome about that. Okay, so, but yeah, feel free to throw in your thoughts, because there could be all sorts of little themes hidden in that kind of thing. I'm seeing it from one angle, maybe Matt's seeing it from another, maybe others here will see it from another as well. I like to take all perspectives because that's what's interesting and what it may come up with the most coolest story. So this blue one can be the Walker legend. And what did they stand for? What was the key word for them? Was it friendship? Because I know there was a few, but I want to get the main one in. Friendship, community, and charity were like all the words, and I'd say they're all pretty equal. Friendship isn't like the main one, but we'll just stick that one in. We gotta pick one. Oh no, what's happened? We've lost it. Let's go back. There we go. Highlands. Well, we'll say farm/highland zone, because would a monument of somebody who does the opposite of what the capital stand for be there? If anything, it's more likely going to be in the farmland zone, because that's what the people stand for, their community and friendship and family and helping each other. Because I mean, farmlands, down to earth people, I think it's going to be very close knit there. Kind of similar to Everbloom. I mean, Everbloom Forest and Lakefall in its own way is a close-knit community, but I think there's going to have to be some distinct differences between the two, and how the people of the farm are different to the people of Lakefall, so that there's a difference, and we're not writing the same story twice in episode 2 to episode 1. I mean, of course, the people in episode 1 are a lot more isolated and a little bit more stuck in their ways. But I'm not stereotyping, because I think there'll be people of Lakefall that are great and trying to escape from that rigid way and things as well, as we talked about in the character streams previously. Save. There we go. So we've nicely just commented on those dots, just so we remember where we're thinking of putting them. And I think that was a really worthy conversation. So we've sort of fleshed them out a little bit more, even though there's still a big question mark with that one and the Walker. There's still, but we've got an idea of who they are, at least, and what they stand for. We just don't know their actual grade yet. But it's got to be something big and something really that's really changed things for people. And I think all these 4 do tick the box of doing something epic. Alright, and we do with the ways they've been twisted tweet by cultures box there, which is what I vaguely mentioned about them having different stories about gods, which is just something for consideration later, I think, as we write characters and some people's arcs. But yeah, we don't have a name idea for the kit legend yet, but we're starting to develop them, so one might come to mind soon. But no rush. We don't have to think of all this overnight. We can build this pantheon and flesh it out over time if we wish. Hi Morwick, how you doing? Welcome to the stream. I hope you're well. Right, so what I'm going to do is magic is going to go there. This only talks about magic really, so I'm going to put a page break here and have tech here, so that the magic and technology are separate. This is all magic. We've rarely talked about the tech, though we can move this one down here because this is more related to talking about that. Well said, miss, and same to you as well, thank you. I didn't know there was a Kappa remote, you know, that had a top hat on it, unless that's a custom you might, but that's pretty cool. Oh, it's yours. I think it says it's yours anyway. Very unique. Are the kits the tigers? Forgotten, the kits are the cats that used to be called Neko, so they're not the full furries, but they are the ones that sort of almost human but still cat. They're Kit Kat, the full furry cats. So kits are like descendants from the Kit Kat. If you go on the website, folks, the character NPC form has been updated with the new race names on there as well. So it'll clarify who each of them are if you're confuzzled. What I'll probably do, actually, now I'm thinking about it, is add a image of each of them at some point. Just like I have with the barrels here. You know, I've got the barrels in this part of the timeline to show who we mean. I'll do the same with this eventually and have pictures with it, so it's pretty and stuff. But if anyone wants to look at our Law Bible closer, feel free to. It's right there, and you can see this timeline of history from there. So glad you like it. Yeah, it's cool. Okay, so we were about to write about technology, weren't we? So we talked a bit about inventions that have impacted the world most, because I think it's important to talk about and something that's actually relevant to the story and the law we're building, because it's so easy, isn't it, to get carried away with tech and then have a big list of terms that might not even have any links. So really cool that we thought about the main one that's needed, and anything that the people of the world actually really do need there, which was light. That was the big one, because that's what they lack, or what they lacked, should I say, from this time. Now, if anyone does spot another thing that's worthy of having an invention for, feel free to mention. I might have not spotted something myself, you see. There might be other things on this timeline shouting out at me that we might need some sort of tech for. But tech itself is a huge subject, and it doesn't necessarily involve computers or futuristic stuff. I see it as a broad thing that includes inventions and anything that improves people's quality of life. And as sort of advanced civilization and how people go about life. So I found this Tumblr here, this person's Tumblr, and I thought this was really interesting. I haven't really read it through, but I've noticed there's a really long list. Oh my goodness, I've got an itchy eye. Well done, I see you're in the planning stage right now. Yeah, so we sort of go to and from things. We sort of do a bit of story and world building, then have a break, work on game dev, and go back to world building and story when it's relevant to. The planning's never going to end. Even when we get to stream 1,000 onwards, there'll still be planning going on. Because we tend to keep things a bit open-ended. We have this sort of structure, this skeleton structure here of the series plan, like a very rough world map, and really messily placed where we're gonna have what. We start here in this forest. So we got this rough outline, so we know what's coming, but we still keep it open of what potentially these places could have in them, and what they could be like, just so that everything's still fresh years on, because and we can still get excited about things to come. So yeah, the planning never ends. It's also so huge, so it's not something you can do overnight. But it's cool because it's getting more rich as we go on. Like, it started as something so basic and generic, but there was always a real potential there, and it's just expanded, and we've put pieces and connections and more interesting lore together over time. What music are you going to use? Aaron Crow is the name. I think that's how I say their surname, but I might be completely wrong. I might have butchered it. But yeah, they've got a lot of tracks, like hundreds. In fact, it's the music playing in the background. I have this playlist. There's still about 100 tracks I can still add of their music to this playlist as well, that I'm going to do when I get a bit of time. Because this is basically zero budget, this project is, so luckily there's free to use music out there for things like that. I see, so you will just use canned music if you would. What's canned music mean? I don't know the term. Okay, so I'm probably going to have a look through these, folks, and make some bullet point lists so we can keep in mind things we might need to consider for people and their way of life. So the first one, and we'll do it in order of what's on this Tumblr so we can keep organised. So energy, interesting one. I'm literally going to just write what this article says, and some of them even might take me by surprise and be something we've not even thought of. So how does this world get energy? Fossil fuel, hydropower, solar power, biofuels, wind power, nuclear. A society that runs on a certain type of fuel probably does so because that resource is abundant there. So keep it in mind how much they power with their current energy level. How dangerous is their energy source? The medieval level fancy is not going to have solar power, etc., etc. Is it renewable or non-renewable? If it's fossil fuels, they're bound to run out sometime. Oh, that's, yeah. I mean, this sort of links with what because we got a few points here. We have food sources, metals and elements, safety and security, trade routes, and a lot of what's going to be on here is going to bring up these little things, all the things that make the world and life work. And it's good to, sometimes it's easy to just not think of those and forget them. But when you do think them, or at least have them in mind and set something in stone, your world will be more consistent for it. That's how I'm seeing it. Can music's a term for using music that made and out in the marketplace to buy per track via non-can music when a composer writes and plays music for your game? Can music is not a bad term, but yeah, I wasn't sure because I'm not familiar with it is all. But yes, I mean, we're still in super early development, so we don't know how the game is gonna evolve before Roots and Rumours release. But I feel at least happy that we've got something decent for that, because I'm very fussy with sound and music. In fact, it's one of my favourite things to do, and I don't talk about it much, but on my iTunes I have folders for things like mood, setting, like is it a scene, is it a boss theme, is it a forest, is it a snow area, is it a chill track, is it a romantic track, is it a hopeful track. I've got all these folders so I can make sure all the songs are like in the right, because the last thing you want is to play. It's a pet peeve of mine when you watch something and the music is just not fitting for what the scene is. It's so important to it to help evoke the mood, to have the right sound. So yeah, I'm a bit of a geek for that, and I don't talk about it much because we don't really have music streams. But yeah, it'll make the scenes better having things like that in mind, like thinking, is this, what do we want to evoke, what emotion is this, and then actually play a piece of music that is that. Just a bit of advice, 85% of the players turn the music off when starting a game. I hate it due to I'm a composer. Yeah, I personally think if you're playing a story driven game, you're a big old silly Billy to not have the music on, right? Because you're certainly not going to get immersed in it without it on. I can totally get people not having the music off or muted if they're playing a simulation game or something that's sandboxy, because sometimes people watch videos or do other things and have other things in the background while playing games like that. But anything story driven, it's kind of like watching a film on mute and only having the subtitles on, but actually turning all sound off. That's how I see it. If you turn it off when playing a story game. Need to have a large title track to keep the player from muting the music. I found works well. Interesting. And the only time I have music off is when I play things like MOBAs. Yeah, same for me. I mean, not gonna lie, I've sometimes muted music when I've put on a game, but it's been a sandboxy game, or a card game like Gwent or something, that is more like a background game to play while you're doing something else. But for story stuff and RPGs, you fully have to just be watching that, otherwise you're not going to have the same experience. It's all about story and immersion with that genre games. Hey, I've been lurking messaging. For me, it's whether I enjoy. It's whether I enjoy the music or not. Hi, Kunga, you do it so good to see. It's an interesting question to bring up, though, for sure. I'm glad you've brought it up, because it can. It's a shame how sound design in general can be underrated and forgotten about. I think it's just as important as the art, for sure. It's good to see you, Kunga. Hope you've been well. Okay, so what we're doing, folks, for Kunga, anyone popping in, we've just been having a big old ramble today. We've just been fleshing out our pantheon a bit more, and you can see this pantheon on the ideas discussion section of our Discord, folks, if you want to see the spreadsheet a little bit closer. It's not completely full yet. There's still a lot of gaps to fill in with these guys. But it's getting there. We're sort of getting what each of them stand for and where they are in the world as well. In fact, I'm going to fill those in here. Urban region, question mark, because we're not 100% sure, but we've got a pretty good idea it's there. Farm Highlands region. And for the draw, desert region. And those are really good regions. And because we're spreading out these 6 legends regionally, so that we can like explore different themes with each one per region, per episode, and have the people living in those regions aligned to those particular ones, more likely aligned to them anyway. This is a nice spread. We've got 1 per episode if we do it this way. So of course, Everbloom Forest is episode 1. The desert region is planned for episode 4. Urban region is planned for episode 5. This is episode 2. This one's episode 3. And just because, you know, we're marking them each out for different episodes doesn't mean that each god will never ever get talked about until that episode. Of course there will. We'll make references to them a lot, and you'll find scriptures lying around. You just don't specifically see their monument until you get to that episode, because this is also the location of the monument. But you can also pray to the stars as well, because that is what they are. The Pantheon are the stars in this game. But some people like to feel closer when they pray, and more intimacy with a legend, perhaps. So that's would make sense for them to visit a monument, and sort of it could be a spot, kind of a point, like sort of waypoint or post in the game where there could be some quests or something specific to the game. I'm open to the idea. Things could be left there. Could be, who knows? You could even communicate with them. Who knows? That's another thing altogether. Back for a bit. What did I miss? Hi Van, how are you doing? I'm glad to see you back. How was the meeting? What we've done, Van, we have just roughly given ourselves an idea of where the other legends could be located in the world. And we had a few discussions. We thought the Kit legend in the urban region was great because there was some really interesting themes about the safe haven being in the urban zone back then. One, because it's so far away from the Highlands. It's two opposite ends of the world, right? The Highlands is the capital, and the urban zone has the other big city on the continent. So two big cities and two sort of different cultures have formed there, and it makes total sense that they would have wanted that safe haven to be away from the people that they disagreed with and rebelled against. The people of the Highlands were all law and order. You've got to fight, you've got to do your duty, this is war, etc. Who knows, we've got to develop all that side of things still, but that's kind of what I'm imagining. Whereas people who gathered to the safe haven in the urban zone, which has sadly probably become a bit corrupt over time, but it could be reformed in a good character arc. You could reform it. Would have wanted to escape from that way of life and absorb themselves in art and following their dreams and passions away from the nasty war and way of life. Away from where the other side of the world where they'd just leave them alone, basically. And And before I retired from Sony Films as an underscore composer, I would work in pre-production with writers doing the same thing you're doing, but would get a drawing of a palm tree drawn on a bar nappy with a note, I need something epic for this in 1 hour. Oh, that's awesome. That sounds really cool, like a really cool time. But yeah, I'm a nerd for this. Like, I live and breathe doing writing and just building stuff and creating. It's a lot of fun. It's what I gotta do, otherwise I'd be bored. I wouldn't know what else to do if I didn't have this. And so for the farmlands, the Act of Greatness can be about either some sort of magical water supply for the farms, or maybe some kind of special fertilizer. Yeah, whatever we're gonna have as our Act of Greatness, it has to be epic. That's a complete 100% has to be life changing, helps the people for generations to come. And it's going to has influence, and it spreads across the ages that it can inspire the people of today still. But yeah, something related to the farmlands makes total sense, because I imagine their monument actually being in the farm rather than the highlands. Because why would something that stood for community and friendship and charity be in the capital full of dictators, right? If anything, this Walker legend was everything that they weren't, and rebelled against that way of life. And I think their traits really kind of could be very much what the people of the farmlands stand for, being very close-knit, helping each other, being a family, and standing for family and everything wholesome. And people of the farm life, very down-to-earth, grounded nature, fits for that, whereas the highlands close by is very much the opposite of that. It's very much about just do your job, and everybody's detached from each other and has no empathy or compassion in that place. But yes, it's fun. Having a lot of fun doing this. It was fun, just super stressful. Oh, was it stressful? But yeah, I could imagine it would be if you had a time limit, like if they said, oh, you got to do it in an hour, that would be. It's really nice to have the freedom and just do as you please in your own time, because the fact is, if I wanted to have the time, if I wanted that, I would just get a job right in the creative industry doing something, or that would at least be my end goal. But no, my real dream is to be able to create myself forever until I die. to be able to say, yeah, that's what I've done with my life. I've just created all my life. Well, it could be that the monument was there first and the capital was made there because people use proximity to it to help their image. The monument was there first and the capital was made there because people use proximity to it to help their image. I'm intrigued. I'm going to have to read that again to properly get it in my head, because sometimes I get brain mail, you know. But yeah, I'm all for you guys throwing ideas at me for why it would have been a certain way and that as well, because you know, it's good to bounce off each other and have different perspectives for these things. But I just loved the idea. I don't know why I like this idea, but the urban region is meant to be super gritty and a place full of crims. But I like the idea of you as the hero reforming a criminal and turning them into an artist or an entertainer, or, you know, a theatre performer, or something really like creative and like making them see the good, make use of their life in a good way rather than resorting to acts of crime, because that's originally what this zone would have stood for when the Kit legend once lived. They create that safe haven for people to leave all behind in a positive way and channel their energies into something good and artistic. And the people living here now have lost their way and have become crims, and they've got to get back to what they used to be. That's what I say. They might not. If you go down a bad hero route, might not be that nice. But I think it could be pretty wholesome if you rebuild that place up again and make it good. Alright, so, but other than that, yeah, we've just been fleshing out the Pantheon more, but what we've also been doing is starting to make a list of technology ideas. Now, by technology, I don't mean futuristic stuff, because our game isn't really that setting, but basically inventions and things that improve people's quality of life is what we're getting at here. And I think it's important to think of technology level, because one thing we do know is that we're going to have a gunslinger in this world. We've also got swordsmen, and we're going to have a range of different jobs and classes as you do in a fantasy story. And what is more fun than having a range of different playable characters to play as? So we got to have a reason behind why someone has a gun. That means that invention has to exist for them to be able to use a gun. It doesn't just pop out of thin air. But for sure, just looking at our world, we've got this side of the world, the Far East, which is very, very traditional and picturesque. And then you've got the West, which is the opposite. It's gritty, it's chaotic, and it's not run by law and order as it is in the East. Maybe there's more... maybe... tech's a thing to consider. Maybe tech was lost in the age of stars because there was a natural disaster. I also see magic as something that can help tech as well. I believe that they can coexist. Sometimes people think one or the other, but no, sometimes you can have both. Makes the world feel more fun that way too. But I'm just looking through this list to see to basically get some ideas jogging in my mind that I might not have considered before. So we've got energy here, but there's loads more. So I'm going to just does the world get its energy? I'm only going to write a really short line for each of these as we do them. Obviously not anything too tech or too advanced, because we're sort of still medieval, especially in Everbloom Forest and the general area at this side of the world. Maybe the urban zone can be a little bit more advanced tech if we wanted it to. Well, that's something else to think about. Now, next one, medieval technology, how advanced? Medical, so that's a cool one. Now, this is a really interesting one to discuss, and we probably have more idea about this one. We've already sort of set in stone with this member of the Pantheon here, because they were a healer herbalist and they stood for healing and medicine and disease, and they cured a plague. So if anyone, it's that one we're going to be looking at there for a bit of a guide on how medicine is in our world. So how advanced is this society's medical technology and why? A society that hasn't developed electricity is not going to have... Nope, obviously it's more of a traditional medicine that we've got. And magic. So herbalism's a thing, and healing magic in general. How well can they control and cure diseases, such as the use of vaccines, medicine? Well, we've cured an entire plague back in the Age of Gods. I mean, it's pretty clear that we're going to have good healing abilities in an RPG game, because otherwise, when we fight, we'll die if we don't have good healing. So that's pretty much a guaranteed anyway. Do people trust the medical technologies that are commonly used, and why? Does society have a negative intent with these medical techniques, or is it just people being paranoid? Interesting questions get raised that you might not consider, so I do like looking through this. How advanced is their medicine? Does it cause side effects? What's used for medicine? Do they use plants themselves? Chemicals, pills? I imagine herbalism and plants are what was used traditionally, as well as magic for those that have use of magic. Again, that is why Everbloom is a good spot for the herbalism themes, because we're going to recruit a herbalist character there, Finch. They're a recruitable playable character, so they could learn a lot from this particular legend about herbalism. And well, seeing TV and film, you have a group of writers that come up with an idea and then they use underscore composers to help sell the pitch to the production team, and it never stops. Yeah, it sounds like it's a lot of fun though, and you'd get a lot of fulfillment from that. It would definitely just be a hectic life, that's for sure. You can trust me, I'm from Community Legend City. Let me do government stuff for you. Well, there's a fruit presses for juicing. Maybe they have ice boxes using Ice Mage magically, or brought in from the snowy region. Or I've got to try and remember the context of what I was talking about. I think you can trust me, I'm from Community Legend City. Let me do government stuff for you. What about the monument? Yeah. Alright, I'll make a note of that one, and I'll bring it back up when it's relevant. And fruit presses for juicing, maybe they have. Yes, we know for sure fruit presses for juicing exist because Everbloom has the fruits in it. Fruit trees, and obviously fruits from the nearby farm as well. That was probably where the non-tree fruits were grown, at the local farm. And fruits is very much a thing in Lakefall and Everbloom. In fact, that's probably what they eat a lot of in general. I think having considering people's ways of life, I think it's important to think of things like, well, food and water is one, and I believe that's on the list as well. In fact, we'll put food on its own. So fruits, well, in Lakefall and Everbloom, we'll put in fact, we might need to make titles for these in general. So what I'm going to do is make subtitles for these, because I don't think one line's going to be enough. Now, we don't have anything in the medical thing yet, but we will obviously fill that one out too. And we'll just put that on a new page for now. So we know in Lakefall and Everbloom Forest, which is, for those of you that are coming in and or anyone that isn't sure, that is the episode 1 region of the game. So obviously it's good to think of that one the most, because that's where we currently are in the story, and have building the world around something that's actually relevant is the most important of all. So thinking of what I'm mentioning fruit presser is what's made me think of, we need to think of that as well. And fruits is definitely something that they're going to eat, because that goes with the story and the conflict, because the fruits in this game are alive, or well, they've just recently come to life. So that's created a conflict between humans, well, beings in general, because not just humans are eating the fruits, I'm sure elves and others do as well. What was that noise? Weird loud noise just scared me. So obviously it's just great having that, because we're not just throwing in fruits for the sake of it. It's actually a reason for the conflict and why the fruits really despise other beings in Everbloom Forest and Lakefall. And I'm sure they live off other things as well. You can't just have a diet of fruit. So jogging our memory on what Everbloom Forest is, it's a forest. And there's a water source, there's lakes and rivers and waterfall, lots of plants, lots of flowers. It's your typical enchanted, old, isolated forest. Lots of large cliffs. There's not a farm on Everbloom or Lakefall, but the farm is very close by. It's the next zone. So I imagine they travel and transport other crops like wheat and other non-fruit foods from that local farm to Lakefall. And part of Everbloom, like the very edge of Everbloom, which we haven't designed yet on the maps, but we will be doing that in a future build, we'll have Father Maple within it, and it's all the trees will be cut down. Father Maple will still be standing, but other trees will have it's going to be like this area of forest that was once lush that has now been deforested almost, because they're probably intending to turn that at the edge of Everbloom Forest into a farm, like expand on the farm that's just on the outskirts of the forest, right? And again, Father Maple's really angry for that reason, and he's probably murdered a lot of woodcutters that have tried to chop down the rest of the trees. And yes, it's a dangerous trade route because you have to pass Father Maple, I think that's an interesting thing. Do the people have to pass Father Maple to get to Lakefall, or is there another trade route people are going down? Because I still believe people are getting their food from Lakefall. That hasn't entirely stopped. People are a little bit more scared because things are coming to life in the forest. Father Maple's a big massive tree, by the way, for anyone coming in case you're not sure. And he's alive and he's very scary. And I believe we did briefly mention that we're going to have a tavern keeper and a general sort of cook of the village that deals with the food that's imported. And they are a little bit concerned because there's less of it coming in since the things in the forest have come to life, and obviously they don't want the people of Lakefall to starve to death, because that's probably what they relied on. Fruits and crops from the nearby farm for their food. And I'm trying to think what other food sources they could have other than the farm to rely on, that they would have had to resort to if they weren't getting the goods in enough. Because that's like we've talked about it a bit in the story suggestions and streams, but it's going to be what leads the NPCs wanting you to find this secret grove of fruit trees, because they desperately need to find something. Maybe people can magically make artificial blood for transfusions, but I guess that would be too convenient for vampires. Oh, so you're thinking of the medical head in there. Yeah, that's something to consider, especially because vampirism exists in our game. It's an interesting thing to raise, and who knows? I like particularly picking things that have relevance to characters and people and themes that we have in the world. So I think that we should have consider that as well, at least. And there's probably fishing, but it probably would be good for vampires, but I'm trying to think how it could be a drawback for vampires as well, potentially. Like, yeah. So there's probably fishing, hunting for wild game, so maybe their winery for grapes. Yes, so let's just remember that Everbloom actually don't have the grapes themselves. The grapes are on the farm. So the winery likely exists in the farmlands. And, you know, I like that it would be there because all the people in the farm can get drunk. And the farmland zone, I think we're shaping it around a place that's all about community and family and closeness. So I think there could be some wholesome moments there. I mean, Everbloom Forest do have a secret grove of fruit trees, but it's secret and they don't know. So I think they wholly rely on that farm for most of their stuff. It creates that conflict and that tension of, oh my gosh, we're not getting our food now, because things from in the forest have come to life and the trades people and merchants are too scared to come trade and import goods, and we're more reasons why the people of Lightfall and Everbloom are struggling since things in the forest have come to life, the better, so we can have more things to sort of worry about and want to help people with. If life was all perfect, that would be no fun. So we'll put in brackets for great. We did when we did the farm map, we spent a time once just making a farm map last year when we did the Carol flashback, and we actually did have a whole part of the farm dedicated to grapes, so it does work for that. And that's probably where blueberry and tomato came from. It's speculated they probably came from the farm, not the Everbloom forest. Now apple and lemon probably came from Everbloom and grew on the secret trees from that grove. But of course tomatoes and blueberries grow from bushes, not trees, I believe, so they would have more likely come from the actual farm. And that just gives an interesting opportunity for them to have travelled with the barrels at some point, right? I love the idea personally of Blueberry and Oliver knowing each other, because they're both like cute characters that could have a really interesting dynamic, even if it was in the past when they knew each other, and they met at one time or another on a trade route. Maybe maybe Blueberry got put inside Hank or something, and Hank and Oliver started talking to Blue. I don't know, I just like making the connections with the characters, and obviously because the barrel characters would have been on a lot of trade routes in their life from Everbloom in the farm, they could have met in that way. Okay, so yeah, that would be neat for them to know. I remember once someone in stream said that they really loved the idea of Oliver and Blueberry being friends, and I was like, oh yeah, that's kind of cute, and I kind of saved the sentence and put it off somewhere at the side, and I read it again the other day, I mean, Blueberry's meant to be a bit sadistic, but probably because of naivety, right? They don't really realise that being evil is bad. They haven't had the right upbringing like Oliver. But I mean, poor Lemon. Lemon's been a good father figure to Blueberry, I'm sure. Maybe not. They're a little bit more evil, but it's still an interesting dynamic potentially, and I think it'd be weirdly cute. So I'm just considering that, making connections between the fruits and barrels, even if it's nothing big or huge, but just a moment where they interacted for a short period of time that we can insert in just for extra wholesomeness value. So yes, nearby farm, there's tomato and blueberry plants actually, because at that time we sort of had the idea that blueberry and tomato should have been from that farm, whereas we don't know where the secret grove of apple and lemon trees are, but that will be added on a new map in Everbloom eventually when we make the new maps. Okay, so I mean, they could export the wine as well to Everbloom, but I imagine they'd keep a lot of the wine for themselves. But I don't think the people of the farmlands would be selfish. They're probably very, very happy to make trades. But they'll obviously get something in return. Do you reckon they'd get from Lakefall in return for giving food and crops? Lakefall have a water source, so maybe that water source would be valuable to the people of the farmlands, because they would probably want something too. So we'll say here source of water. Now, we don't know whether that source of water is safe to drink, but there's going to be a lot of wildlife in Everbloom. It was the epicenter of the spell that brought things to life, and all sorts of creatures have come to life that shouldn't have, and obviously wildlife as well exists, and we'll have a wildlife stream eventually, and we'll make cute wildlife sprites. So if wildlife is drawn to forest, that means the water's okay, right? They need something good, the people of Lakefall and Everbloom, because life is a struggle enough as it is. But it isn't that bad. I mean, the isolation would be lovely and peaceful, but it's got its pros and cons. Hi Sorter, how you doing? So good to see you. And wine was used in an early accepted, so that could fit with herbalism too. Yeah, maybe they used some of the wine for that as well. Good point. And the big waterfalls in Lakefall, so a water wheel would be a convenient source of power for them. Oh yes, water wheel, water power. Well, the best thing to do here is probably, we'll put water power there just so we don't forget, but we'll also put the name of the place too, because the way it's going, different regions might have different ways of life and different ways of doing things. So we'll mark water power there. Maybe wind power for the farm. Maybe fossil fuels for as we get further west to the more urban zone. Maybe people start to get a little bit more. We'll think about it, because obviously it's cool to keep that open, but any ideas from them and I'll add them for the other zones as well. Now, Lakefall and Everbloom. It's more important, of course, to focus on Lakefall and Everbloom first, and most of all, considering that's our relevant zone. But I still like to think of the bigger picture too. So if something comes to mind for one of the other regions, and someone that is really set on what it could be, then feel free to say, because I'll add it, just like I've done for farmlands with the winery. So plants, well, we'll say herbalism, of course, and I think Yorisa, the herbalist healer, is pretty much set that as a thing, and it just works brilliant because of the amount of plant life in this area. I do not think any other part of the world will have as much plants as Everbloom. In fact, I'm going to encourage the visuals of each region to look very different from one another. So all the episodes in different places, we've got lots of different. The only other place in the world I imagine having anywhere close to as much plant life is the jungle zone, but it'll be a very different type of plant life. Really, we won't have the same. But if we're looking at what's on this side of the continent, you've got the sparse snow areas. They would not have much plant life at all. In fact, it's probably likely that they'd probably export from the capital as well. Thinking of trade routes, the capital's probably the biggest one, and they these others just are branches off that help each other too. But yeah, thinking about that, how much control would the capital have over the nearby smaller zones? That's another thought. I mean, I imagine they'd have quite a bit of control because Traitorio, but let's just imagine Traitorio isn't a completely black and white dictator here. He's actually a bit more sneaky than that, I think, and a little bit more manipulative. Some people might actually really adore Traitorio and think he's wonderful as a prime minister. Because that, I think, is even more ironic that he has the name Traitorio, and it's staring people right in the face that he's a traitor because his name's Traitorio, yet people think he's a legend. That would be quite fun, more amusing, I reckon, than if he was just all out clearly evil to everybody around him. And the king is like being pretty sneaky from what I've looked at in his bio, and the king doesn't know the half of what he's up to. And of course, just stating that character bios are always up for adaptation to fit better with that lore if necessary. But I think there's like quite a cool dynamic with Traitorio and that king that I'd like to keep. It's going to be squash there, now I'm thinking about it. well instead, I just realised it really needs to have the capital marked there, because when I mention the capital, folk might not even know what I mean or where it is. Oops. The capital is in the Highlands, and it's the centre of all these little places, so yes, I'd say a lot of them would rely on it, but Everbloom are more independent. But it's thinking of how much control the Highlands, the capital, has over Everbloom. The fact that it's being deforested, it is a little bit scary probably for the inhabitants and settlers, because one day it could all be gone. All the forest could have been chopped down. If they've already started chopping down the trees near Father Maple, it's like, well, how many other trees do they want to chop down? And maybe the farmland have no control over that. Maybe they're just doing what they're ordered to. So save that. Okay, I'm back in another meeting. Hopefully I can catch it at the end stream. Yeah, good luck with the meeting, Van. And feel free to, if you're curious and don't want to miss, feel free to have a peek at the VOD after. Okay. Further up, I said that they could have a water wheel free. Well, it's better that you say, just to make sure I didn't miss Matt. Because it would be tragic, wouldn't it, if you guys said something absolutely astonishingly good and I never saw it. How tragic. But that's why ultimately I always make sure to look through the VODs at the end after stream, because I know that there's always a chance I could miss something. It always can happen when you're multitasking, so and I never want to risk missing anything that could just work so well. So okay, so, and would the farmland or Everbloom have more beekeeping? Right, well, right now there's no hives or anything that would show that bees are around in Everbloom, but there was a bee enemy that we did make in Everbloom, and although the sort of the way we're going to go about the sprites, because we're going to switch to it being on map, the battle system is going to be rehauled a bit. I still wouldn't be against having bee enemies and bee sprites and wildlife in the game. I know that at some point when we do go back to the battle system, I'm going to have a stream that's dedicated to the wildlife of Everbloom, and we'll sort of decide together what creatures are here, and the ones that are going to be ones that we fight in battle, and ones that are just non-aggro ones, because of course there'd be non-aggro friendly creatures too, like bunny rabbits. But I'm all for making our own unique wildlife too and giving them unique names, like calling bunny rabbits something else entirely that's really cute and adorable, but clearly you know was a bunny from their name. But that's a good thing to mention. In fact, I could have a wildlife section and plop it here, but we'll wait. Wildlife is such a big thing in itself. I think we could have a whole stream of that. But I'll make sure to remember the bees. But of course, if there was bees, that could be another thing too. Honey. So maybe the honey is valuable, because we got to think of what people of Everbloom and the resources of Everbloom could be a benefit to the nearby regions too, when they make these trades. It's not just about what Everbloom can get from others, it's about what Everbloom can give to them too. And I'd say a water source is a key one, as well as some of the herbals they have, the plants and flowers that could heal illnesses and injuries and disease. That could be another. As well as anything extra like honey or any valuable food sources that you couldn't get anywhere else in the world. So I'm just making blue anything that we're sort of discussing right now. It's all the little bits, everything that is on the subject of citizens' way of life and how they live. And I think that sort of links to technology, because it involves potential inventions and things that would have had to have been made as part of life for people to make it be a thing. Wildlife is there, but that's another thing altogether. And then we have like the pop culture of the world and entertainment, which is really important and awesome as well, because people have to have recreation and leisure. Also, another interesting branch of tech and sort of inventions is the way people communicate, like communication in the world. So that involves, of course, how people send mail to each other and how they get the news. I think something got mentioned about that last stream. Someone had an idea of how magic could benefit communication. So we could link magic as a way people could communicate, but then the question springs to mind of how would humans do that then? Because it's kind of making them not have any means of communicating, unless of course something was invented by magic that was accessible to all, like some kind of world invention involving magic, a bit like the tower that Lusar created is made as a global thing to help benefit people so that they can communicate easily. Yes, it's an interesting thing. We know that we're going to be able to communicate with the Lakefall tree, but that would be via a sapling, and with something that's a little bit more. I'm going to have to review my notes about the trees and that little sapling key item we're going to have that's going to allow us to communicate with the trees, because that was pretty cool, and that was all to do with the alignment you were on as well. but it's vague in my mind because it was from months ago, those streams were. But that doesn't necessarily have to link with general communication. That's a separate thing that involves the trees. So it's a little bit more spiritual. We know they have tame horses, and the wood they're letting the farmland harvest counts as export. Maybe the Drow use bellows to move air through the caves. Oh yeah, it's good that you're thinking of the caves as well, because we can't neglect that. I know that we haven't made that zone yet, because it's going to be something that's made in a future build once we've got the lakefall side of the game out the way, which will come main quest 4 and 5. But it's still really cool to have ideas in mind for that, because it's one day we will be making that cave map and we will want to know about the Drow and what they are like. And we'll be definitely having more streams on them soon as well. And we can, I think it'd be really cool to work on this particular thing. Where is it? The conflict between the humans and reptiles a bit more, and building some real history there. And good, something really good that's going to make us connect with both and understand both's point of view. Where am I going? We've got so many pages now that I can't even find what we're doing. Right, so I am gonna move on to the others, because we have about several other subheadings here. But what I'm gonna do, for any that you guys mention in chat, Mel or anyone else, I'll look off stream and add them after stream. I'll probably make these lists longer, but there's so many, and I want to make sure I cover them all before we put an end to the stream, because I see time is ticking, which is shocking because it feels like I've only been streaming half an hour. So medical, we got that one in. That's their food. That's there. So we got to that one. I'm also going to put and water here. Did we read all this? Yeah, we got lake, river. How do they get the water? Is it safe to drink? How do they clean it? Yeah, that I'm gonna have to read that more. We got loads. Look, we got all this. Seal patterns. We got it. Goes on forever. Technology. So the next form of technology is transportation. So, I mean, you've mentioned horses just, so that's that one. Now, transportation might be the same worldwide and with all regions, but not necessarily. Just because, like for an Everbloom and the farmlands have horse and cart, doesn't mean everyone else does, but that what matters most of all is that it makes sense why the regions would have different from each other, because sometimes technology that's too varied without reason could be quite jarring. So there needs to be a good actual reason why some places have different tech to others. But I think with what we're building, people are very separate in the west to the east, so it could be that they just have nothing to do with each other and are completely isolated from each other's politics. So if they've got advanced tech or something that the east don't have, then it's because they just don't want them getting their hands on it. And it kind of goes into the past with the safe haven and the kit legend who wanted to separate from war and that way of life and make a safe haven. So it's nice to have that the difference continue throughout time as well. So we already know that because of the Carol flashback that was made a while ago, they were well, it's really a wagon more than a cart because it's got coverage. I think the difference between wagon and cart is that carts aren't covered up, but wagons are, if I remember. And the wood there letting the farmland counts as export may dry, yes. So I'm going to put there. I'm not even putting it in the right spot, have I? I've lost the plot. By the end of the first episode, we would have built a small boat. Yeah, this is like how we see it. I see this as another medium to write in a novel series, in all honesty. Like, I could have approached this differently and thought instead of making a game, I'm going to turn Raindrop Chronicles into a novel, because it would totally work in that format too, with the scope of it and the sort of time length of how long this is going to go on for. When you look at someone like George R.R. Martin, look how many years it's taken him to write the Song of Ice and Fire series. Yeah, I see myself as George R.R. Martin, except someone that will actually eventually finish it. That's kind of the difference. But I'm definitely just as ambitious. Okay. But yes, I chose video game over novel because I love the visual side of video game. Oh gosh, I love the visual side of it, and the fact that all the senses are brought to life with video game. Not only can you see the world visually that you can't in a novel, but you can hear it. And you can interact with it as well. Like, you can actually make choices and different consequences and endings to the story, whereas in a novel it only ever goes one way. So the huge appeal for me with the video game route is that. But like, you're spot on, Forgotten. It literally is going down the novel route. It's definitely not a game that's surface level or short, or my sort of idea is to have that depth. The Witcher series, it's the same for The Witcher, because that's an RPG game. Obviously it's a lot huger than Raindrop Chronicles, The Witcher, because it's 3D world and the scope of it's like a massive, like you had a whole studio make that game. But in terms of how they handled the narrative side of things, I'm very inspired, and you can tell the lore is really in depth, and it's no surprise that game came from a series of books, because there's just so much richness in the lore for the Witcher game. And gets comfy in the lobby. Hi, Looking Glasses, how you doing? It's so good to see you again. I hope you're having a wonderful day. Are you guys all ready for your weekend holiday? Because I know it's Easter, and I'm sure you guys are going to have days off. I hope it's all going to be fun ones. And for anyone popping in, Looking Glasses, anyone else, we're working on tech at the moment. I am making some subtitles of everything linked to technology. So technology is super broad. It doesn't just mean future tech or spaceships or AI and computers and anything like that. Nope. Technology is literally anything that helps people live and improve their quality of life. So I'm making lists of all the different segments of technology from this Tumblr article. We're on transportation at the moment. So we know that we got horse and cart. And this is really good because it's raising some questions. Cars, trains. We don't have cars and trains in this world. Horses, other four-legged hooved things. Now that's the interesting thing. So horses right now are the animal that we've got as the creature that pulls the cart. But I'm not completely against having it have a unique twist to horses if we want, and have our own creature that you wouldn't expect pulling the carts. So for now, I'm actually going to just put question mark. Nothing wrong if we do decide to go with horse, but at the minimum, I'd like to change its name to another creature. I mean, I'm not saying we have to change every creature's name in the whole world. Some of them can keep the planet Earth name as we know it, if it works best. But if there's an option to be creative and about a creature's name, we can give it a fantasy name if we wish, as long as it's accessible and pretty obvious that that animal is that. We know that Chub Cheeks Bocco, his character, who is like the reptile power lord, he has an obsession with hamsters, which is really funny considering his character's meant to be such an icon of power and intimidation. He has this soft spot for hamsters of all things, which kind of brings a really softness to his character, I think, and I kind of like the unexpected softness of someone who's sort of bad and power hungry, liking a cute animal. So he likes hamsters, and he's probably going to have a hamster mount. In fact, he is going to have a hamster mount. That's the plan. A spell gone wrong. It was a small hamster, but it turned into a big mount from a spell gone wrong. Like it deflected or something and landed onto the hamster when it shouldn't have. So opportunity for some amusing moments there. We might not necessarily call them hamsters in this world though. We might give them a brand new wildlife name, but they are basically hamsters and will resemble that rodent when we have that character in the game. I can't think of any other transportation methods right now, so we'll move on to the next one, but it's definitely something to keep in mind for other areas in the world too. Information technology. The internet is a complete no-go. We don't have, this isn't modern age. We are mostly setting this in a medieval world, but with potential to increase tech levels in certain areas, because we do have people like a gunslinger playable class in Legion in this game, so that is kind of a step above medieval, obviously. So potential for steam power and industry is not impossible. Clearly industry could exist to some degree, but I imagine that side of things would have probably developed in the West, where the safe haven was built, because people are encouraged to follow their passions there. So because people are encouraged to follow their passions, from the Kit legend who built the safe haven, it makes sense that people way of life and civilization would be a bit more advanced over there, because when people are all focused in war and military, you're backwards, and then you haven't moved on with the times, and technology's lacked and it's just behind. So yeah, it kind of does work. So I'm really happy with setting stone more that with the Kit character. I think they're a really interesting character. I think all our legends are really interesting. We do need to talk a little bit more about the other two, but because they were already developed, there's been less discussion. But the ones that we have built together on stream properly, sort of are really getting fleshed out now. Yeah, so I don't even think this one's relevant because we don't have the internet here. Communications technology. How do people communicate? By mail, by phone, by fax, radio, telegraph, internet, in person. How fast is communication? Okay, so that was an interesting thing, like mail and communication. I believe there has been a little bit of talk about how that could work, but not much. We haven't really discussed it in real depth. I mean, obviously letter and letter mail makes sense with medieval time, especially if we're going to have a lot of paper, books, scriptures that are readable in the world. Keeping with that sort of paper heavy way of life is interesting, especially as that involves wood, and trees are destroyed for paper, a barrel's destroyed for paper. Carol. See, I think we need to keep in mind as well how things like this could affect the main characters of the story, meaning the barrel crew when I say main characters here, because they're really, although we're going to have a large cast and other characters are going to be key in the story as well that aren't the barrels. The barrels are really the heart of the tale, and a lot of a lot of the heart and soul come from the barrels. So thinking about them and how they could be affected by some of the ways of life is interesting too. I mean, wood, it's not a very secure material, could be destroyed for selfish reasons like furniture and paper and wood and materials, and that wouldn't bode well for the barrel crew. Herbalism, putting plants in Carol, we discussed that could make her go high. She's stoner barrels. Elvira smokes tobacco. We don't actually know if it's tobacco that she smokes, actually. So that's another thing to consider too. How on earth did she get that smoking thing? How did she find the smoking pipe that she has? It's an interesting bit of potential backstory there. We've already sort of thought Oliver was a cookie jar that belonged to a boy called Oliver, and that's why the name Oliver is on his ribbon. And we said that Meryl has makeup on because a little girl in Lakefall used her as a toy and put makeup on her to make her pretty, which was really cute. She might have worn a bra from that same girl or for another reason, but the makeup thing is definitely the thing here. Maybe the bra came with that too. Could be likely that it is, because girls like, girly girls like Barbie dolls, and she wanted to make Meryl look like a Barbie doll. That is the colour of that bra. It's typical Barbie doll pink. And we haven't made that character yet, but I imagine she could be the parallel opposite of Fiona Buckington. Fiona Buckington stands more as a young girl character that's more like adventurous and far less girly. Hi Sorta, how you doing? It's good to see you. Doing well, thanks. Thought I'd be a lot busier today, but turns out I'll be mostly chilling out. Well, I'm glad that you've stopped by and says hi on your busy day. That's awesome, Looking Glasses. I appreciate it. And I'm glad you're able to chill. I'm back. Welcome back, Van. See, the meeting wasn't too long, was it? Are they all finished now for good? Hope so. And I would think maybe mail is mostly used between the East Coast areas. Then the capital could have several more lines to the other big cities. Oh, let's look at our map again, because you know me, I have to have some visual to properly, even when I know the map in my head, I like to have that visual thing, so we know what we're talking about. So the East Coast, which obviously is here, so we've got the Everbloom farmland and the capital there, and the capital could, I think when I'm thinking paper mail does make the most sense, and that's the easiest as well, and having it all be this little this region here and this coming from the capital and all here makes sense. As for these guys, they might not have letter. Maybe they have a more advanced way of communicating, or in a more different way. But who knows, maybe they do. Maybe they still use the same one. But I think we're open to be a little bit more creative if we want to be for these out there zones. And even the Cloud City, they could communicate by magic. I know that I've got to review the VOD notes from last stream, but one of you, I think it was Matt, actually came up with a magic related communication idea, so that could totally work for somewhere a bit more out there and magical like the Cloud City. But for somewhere that's very human populated with a human run government and king, they would probably not be too magic focused, would they? Because that's not their thing. Unless somebody made an invention that was available for everybody to use, then maybe they'd be cool with it then. Hi Rex, how you doing? Welcome to stream. I hope you're having a fantastic day. Have you got a holiday? Friday, Monday? I haven't even asked you. Yes, they're finished. Glad they are all over. Yay. Since there's always like they could use signal mirrors any time of the day. Interesting. But yes, that is true, because we do have a tower now that is the source of light on this world, and we don't know if there's always light. That's the question, isn't there now? Because obviously during daytime the sun is the source of light, so it doesn't even matter if the tower's on or off in the day. But at night it for sure needs to be on, and it has to be, otherwise there's a problem. So yes, it's interesting to think of that tower, how that could change things and make things available in the world that wouldn't have been available originally if that didn't exist. So that's an interesting thought as well. So obviously I'm thinking your traditional letters with paper. Here traditional mail, but I can definitely imagine that there could be some different ones too. So I'll keep that in mind, and I'm going to research into signal mirrors and stuff as well. And reread the VOD as well of last time. Now I'm running out. Oh my goodness, it's already 6. So let's get quickly through, because we've still got loads to get through, and I want to get through them all. So recreation. What kind of technology exists for people to have fun with? Things like amusement parks, hobbies. What a coincidence that it mentions an amusement park when we have the swamp theme park that is deserted and creepy right now and has been left behind. But you know, I'm all for someone having some kind of NPC who dreams of reopening that amusement park and the sandwich factory. The one thing I found interesting, someone mentioned that the rides at the amusement park could have been like sort of parodies and satire of historical government figures or something. That was something someone mentioned ages ago, which was an interesting one, which would fit because the capital's really nearby. And maybe that was a reason why the amusement park was shut down, because the government didn't approve of being made the butt of jokes. But we haven't thought of the government of the past yet, but one day we will. And as for what they do for fun, art. We already talked about the leisure house and the safe haven. And traditional forms of entertainment like theatre and plays would have been something people liked, like the days before movies and video games existed. How dangerous technology? What are some more dangerous and stupid things people do for fun? And that's a really interesting question that I would never have actually thought of. Like really stupid, dangerous hobbies. But I feel like recreation and hobbies and leisure in general is something that we could have like a whole stream for at some point. And the others, manufacturing. How do people make things? Are they mass produced and assembly lines made by hand? Well, industry doesn't really exist, or factories, at least not in the East. It's all very much, everything is crafted by hand. We've got Duncan, who is a weapons craftsmaster of Lightfoot, and he's probably the one who makes all the weapons as well as any other carpentry or woodwork and rock work that people would have needed, would need. So everything's like very much homemade and home crafted, and I think that would extend to the farmlands and capital and the other areas in the West as well. But as we go further east, there might be more industry there. It's urban, and I do like the idea of having a city that's very different to the capital in that regard. So the main reason I like that it's more industrial and urban as well is because it shows how much that city have progressed from the traditional capital, because they put their passions and crafts and first in with that safe haven dream. The legend encouraged them to follow more productive ways of life and ways to live than the people in the capital who just valued war and fighting. So naturally civilization's going to become more advanced because of the more productive hobbies and jobs that people would have had. But we know that it's turned more gritty now and a bit more criminal and violent, which is unfortunate in the urban city. But that's the whole part of the fun of the game, because us as the hero will get the chance to turn that city into a better place, change the world, right? It starts as a complete horrible place, but you can make it better if you're a good hero, at least anyway. So I think that the manufacturing is only really relevant to the urban area. But as for Legion, who uses guns, or any other playable class that uses advanced weaponry, that is probably would have come from that city and that side of the world. Clearly not the side that are near the capital. I don't think so. Oh no holiday for you. I'm going to tell them off. How dare they? And safety level for all technology. It's not just manufacturing technology that can be dangerous. What short-term dangerous effects does technology have? What does long-term? Yeah, that's probably. Yes. Okay. Rich people usually have better access to technology. Yeah, are the capital greedy, do you reckon? That's something to decide. We need to spend more time thinking about the government in general and Traitorio as a politician, in how he distributes things, and how, if he's fair, and if he actually gives the impression of not being too bad and fair, but really everybody's just being brainwashed. Because I think that could be definitely more interesting than just going full-blown dictator route. Having someone be a bit more sneaky and bad, in irony to his Traitorio name. But we need to spend more time in general building the government and seeing how it's evolved as well. So I think we could spend some time thinking about that maybe next week as well, and expect us to slowly go back to eventually discussing the present day story at some point. I like to think of the bigger picture for some time, just so we've got our eyes open, and so that we're making sure the world makes sense that we're building around us, which is why I've made these subtiles today, really, so that we can just make sure we've considered each of these things so the world that we're building is consistent, and then we're not completely making something that's not believable. But we'll probably spend a few more streams on world building, talking about really key things like the government, for example, and maybe building some important figures other than the pantheon. We might eventually start filling in more detail with the rest of this pantheon too. But when I think of other important figures, I think of the age of the kings, the age of the first men and the age of kings. We haven't really spent much time discussing this period, and I think it's going to be cool to actually talk about that period more, because all that history will have affected the present day. So we can think of that, and then we can slowly return back to the present day and what's happening in the present day story with the reptiles and humans, and start planning the outline for the next main quests as well, and maybe even considering some NPCs. But yeah, we'll still definitely squeeze out any world building we can, and we'll have world building streams when necessary and when it's required as well. Whenever we think, oh my goodness, yes, it's perfect to talk about this thing today. Stupid bot, I can smell dinner and it's making me very hungry. Hi Rose, hope you've been well and that you have a good night, weekend. Talk again Sunday. Take care, Rod. Thanks for stopping by. I hope you're doing good and you're having a great day. So I imagine that Traitorio and any other government figures, the monarchy, we haven't really decided how much power they have, but I imagine they'd leave most of the work to the Prime Minister, because he's a bit apathetic, the king is, and doesn't really care. He's letting all the corruption happen around him without even knowing it. So I imagine he'd try and give this impression he's this good politician to the people, but really he just gives breadcrumbs, the bare minimum, and he's like maybe secretly hoarding things or doing no good stuff behind people's backs without them really knowing. And I think that sort of personality really connects well with this guy and this government that are taking the X from the raindrops, and the public probably aren't even aware of really what's happening there and all the messed up things that are going on behind the scenes. It adds a bit of mystery, and I think it's overall more interesting than just having a full-blown dictator. And I think deep down we all know he's a dictator and he's a psychopath, and the name Traitorio makes that very clear. But the people of who live here, some of them, a lot of them probably are blind to it, especially some of the older folk more set in their ways, though there could be some rebels that know exactly what he is, and for sure there'll be some people that are rebels of the government around. Since there's early tech, there would be more emphasis on easily preserved foods like jam and smoked meats. Oh, Traitorio's limiting access to sandwiches. Yeah, the sandwich factory is an interesting thing, because if that the theme park is sort of shut down and the sandwich factory is abandoned as well, and the swamp area is so close to the capital that it's almost like a second base to them, a place full of secrets of the government that are long dead. See, I'm imagining this swamp to be the creepy zone of the game, originally anyway, how it's going to be when we first go there. Because I imagine progression with the zones over time, like how something looks when you first see it isn't necessarily what it's going to look like by end game. Like Everbloom Forest, for example, it might be run by humans now, but the fruits could be living there by the end, and the place could be completely different and weird. Different things that have happened affect the world, not just the hero and the party. affects everything. But yeah, it's going to be like a bit creepy, abandoned, and the sandwich factory is probably got all these hordes of mouldy sandwiches in, or not. What do you reckon? But I imagine it's going to be a place where a lot of secrets about the government are uncovered, to put it that way, and you're not meant to really be there because it's their second base. It's wet, perfect place to store all their raindrop messed up stuff, but someone wants to restart the amusement park and is potentially messing up what Tratorio's up to, and yeah, that would be bad for them, especially if the rides of the amusement park are like parodies and satire cartoons of the government. I don't think he'd be happy if that was brought back. Imagine if there was a ride with Tratorio's face on the front and it looked really goofy. He wouldn't be happy if that ride was around. But yeah, that's an interesting thing. I'll be making notes of all this that you say. Easy preserved foods like jam and smoked meats, yeah, that's interesting too. Jam and smoked meats, who do you imagine which region would have them more than anybody? I mean, that's another thing. Maybe the capital. Speed of the technology development. Has anyone, let's have a look, it's gone. Has anyone tried to stop the technology growth? If so, why? Yes, that's the question. Why hasn't any government leader or king stopped the urban zone from flourishing? When the Kit Legend ran to the other side of the world to escape war and build his safe haven, why wasn't he murdered? And why still hasn't anyone today finished them all off for being rebels? That's something I'm wondering as well. But I imagine they went as far away as possible to avoid being murdered. If they had settled by the beach or the swamp or somewhere really, really close to the capital, they could have easily have sent a few of their soldiers out to finish them off. But they sort of have left them to go about life. And maybe once they did thrive at one point when the safe haven was around, but eventually they've turned into a criminal haven now. The safe haven has turned into a criminal haven, but there's probably still potential there deep down, and even the criminals could be talented artists for all we know. And teach through technology what came before the technologies your society is currently using. It probably, the urban area, the urban zone was probably pretty much like the West was when the safe haven was created. It was more medieval. But the Kit who encouraged industry and craft and art made building flourish and things like that, perhaps. And there wasn't people that disapproved because the two cities were isolated from the other. The people that are drawn to the traditional way of life probably just gathered to the west, and the people who were rebels gathered to the east. I mean, vice versa. I've got it the wrong way around. And that, yeah, there's a few interesting questions there. Are working conditions better or worse? And I guess that again all comes from, is Traitorio going to be obviously cruel and evil? But I think no. I think obviously there should be signs that he is a bad politician. But like we say, the people aren't completely aware of that and are blind to it. Maybe one of the larger roads is being used to smuggle something, so it's supposedly shut down, but people hear it right at night. Interesting. Yeah, there's definitely a lot of potential there with that amusement park for sure. And the thing that draws me to it, which I have a vague idea of at the moment, because building like a skeleton plot line behind the scenes, but there's still tons of gaps to fill in, is that it's going to be the episode 3 segment of the game, but late game episode 3, possibly. We'd probably go visit the snow areas first. And that point, that end game episode 3, is literally the mid part of the game in the saga. So there's a chance for some revelations there, and real cliffhangers and twists and shocks before leading us into the end game part of the game that's gonna lead on to potentially saving Carol's family and who knows and all sorts. So yes, and maybe the capital sent people to set up the criminal organisation and corrupt things when they couldn't send an army to destroy it. Maybe the capital sent people up to criminal organisations to corrupt things when they couldn't send an army. Yeah, maybe. Interesting thoughts to consider, folks. So there's a few bits to go on there with the government stream next week if we have one. But I'm thinking of having at least one stream next week where we think deeper into the government and the age of kings and first men as well. Maybe think up some people who'd have lived at that time as well and build a bit of more of a solid history. Yeah, we'll see how that goes and where that leads. And eventually at that point we might get back into talking about the conflict between humans and reptiles once we've got that out of the way. And as for the other bits, because there's so many other little bits to talk about, fables and celebrities and music, theatre, vacation spots and all that kind of thing, which we've sort of talked about today a little bit. Whenever it's relevant, we'll probably have another world building stream about things like that too. Alright folks, so I'm going to put an end to stream now. Oh my goodness, how is it this late? Like, I'm not even shocked anymore, because you know what my world building streams are like. Time just always goes by so fast. So I'm going to have to rush off again, not surprisingly, because of getting carried away with time. And thanks for hanging out with me, guys, and liking, those of you that were liking. And I'll be back next week on Tuesday. It's going to be fun. We're going to have another week of world building streams, and then the week after that, maybe move into present day story stuff again and outlining. So government chat, Age of First Men and Kings next week, and maybe reptile and human war the week after, because that's present day story stuff. But it's still kind of part of the world building, the reptile and human war, because we have to build that history and make it super good. We got to make it super good. That's going to be the interesting one. It's going to be the fun one. Thanks for the stream, Rosie. Didn't your clocks change too? That makes things feel faster as well. Yes, the clocks changed this week, so at least we're back to normal times now, for sure. Alright, and had a blast. It's so nice being part of this community. You do a great job. Thanks, Forgotten. Yeah, and anybody again, ideas in the ideas discussion chat, feel free to throw them in. Remember, I do see them, and even if I don't actively bring them up, I'm still taking it all in, and any ideas you guys have. If I don't bring something up, it's because it's not the time to, or there's stuff I'm doing behind the scenes with the plot that might be relevant to it that I want to keep a secret for now. But yeah, so I'm excited for next week already. Take care everyone, and I hope you have a good Easter. Easter will be over by the time we return on Tuesday, so I'll wish you a good Easter now. And I hope you have lots of chocolate, everybody. Thanks for hanging out. This is really fun. really excited. So yeah, you take care. Bye bye everybody.